Why the next decade will be critical in the fight against climate change. To Andrew Wheeler, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, global warming is a problem for the future. But scientists say that taking action on climate change is very much a challenge of the present. That's not just because the impacts of rising temperatures, from severe storms to surging seas, are already apparent. It's also, think of it like steering a huge ship, said Drew Shindell, a climate scientist at Duke University U. Under the 2015 Paris Climate Accord, countries agreed to limit warming to hitting the lower target would reduce extreme weather events, spare more species from extinction, and make it easier for people to adapt to what will still be a significantly altered world, according to a 2018 report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. But meeting either climate goal is a tall order. Next week, scientists will gather in Scotland to consider the options as they start preparing the next major IPCC report. There's little debate, it's a matter of accounting. Humans have already unleashed enough greenhouse gases to raise the planet's average temperature by about 1 degree C. At current rates, we will emit enough in the next 10 years to all but guarantee another half degree of warming. Whether humanity should change course is a political question, not a scientific one. But if we decide to, last year's IPCC report, which Rogel J. and Shindell helped write, surveyed the results of hundreds of scientific studies and concluded that emissions must drop to roughly half of 2010 levels by 2030 to maintain a decent shot at 1.5 degrees. By 2050, aiming for 2 degrees gives the world an additional 25 years, more or less, to decarbonize the economy, Rogel J. said. Even so, seeing into the future is never easy, and all of these timelines are inherently uncertain. That's sometimes used as an excuse to delay, said Jonathan Lamontagna, a systems analyst at Tufts University. But he thinks consider the problem of climate sensitivity, a measure of how the planet responds to greenhouse gas emissions. It's usually but the exact figure has proved difficult to pin down. Scientists think researchers have tried to narrow these estimates by analyzing the relationship between past emissions and historical warming trends. However, the true value of climate sensitivity will largely determine how much warming we have in store due to greenhouse gases we've already emitted, and how much carbon we can emit in the future and still meet climate targets. If sensitivity lands on the high end of the range, we've probably missed our shot at limiting warming to even 2 degrees, according to a study this month in Nature Climate Change. If we happen to live in a moderately sensitive world, we still have a chance, but only if CO2 emissions fall to zero by 2030, Lamontagna said. Recent estimates of transient climate sensitivity point to somewhat lower numbers. If so, in the long run, the bigger factor controlling Earth's temperature is how much we manage to reduce emissions in the next decade, Lamontagna said. Scientists have explored how the world might meet its goals under various circumstances, using models that consider the laws of both physics and economics, in hopes of bracketing the range of possibilities. There is no single way to tackle climate change, but the scenarios that succeed share some common features: greater energy efficiency, a dramatic drop in coal use, a sharp increase in renewable energy that helps power electric vehicles, and a shift toward more plant-based, climate-friendly diets. In these scenarios, the changes happen around the world and fast. Many are well under. Implementing them would be expensive, but theoretically feasible. The IPCC Lamontagna's team calculated the price tag could be as high as 3% or 4% of global GDP to max out at 2 degrees of warming by 2100. Failing to act also carries a hefty cost. One study estimates Many of these costs stem from things like natural disasters that damage buildings and other infrastructure, and air pollution from burning fossil fuels that exacerbates respiratory and other diseases. Just the improved air quality from moving to clean fuels would save millions of lives per year, according to a study out this week. Indeed, swift climate action is often a prerequisite not only for improving health but also for reducing poverty and inequality around the world, the IPCC found. Whether society can change fast enough to meet the Paris climate goals is anyone's guess. Scientists can say. So far, countries' official pledges to reduce emissions under the Paris Accord fall far short of what's needed to meet the 1.5-degree target. A 2018 progress report found that, with current commitments, the world will warm 3 degrees by 2100, and more after that. In reality, proposals like the Green New Deal championed by Republic Alexandria, another decade of inaction will likely mean blowing past current climate targets unless we come up with ways to clean up the mess later. One possibility is to remove CO2 from the atmosphere by enlisting trees and biofuel crops to suck up the gas. Scientists have, alternatively, humans could alter the amount of sunlight reaching the surface by injecting reflective particles into the stratosphere. But it's a controversy. The longer we wait to cut emissions, the more appealing such options may become, said Ken Caldera, a climate scientist at the Carnegie Institution for Science. Caldera points out that scientists have been calling for aggressive climate actions for decades. But he objects to, it's not because there is plenty of time, he said, but because he doesn't agree that it's a make-or-break situation. Caldera thinks that cutting emissions is more like trying to kick a bad habit. Stopping. Visit the Los Angeles Times at
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.